Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Her Homeostasis. This video is going to be about how I have changed my diet over the years as a female with type 1 diabetes and hypothyroidism. I'm going to be looking at my notes at the bottom right at my script, just so you know why I'm looking down. So I am not a medical professional, so please do not take anything I say as medical advice or dietary advice. This is just a story about how I've changed my diet over the years as a female with type 1 diabetes and hypothyroidism, and maybe you can take something from what I said, maybe something I say is helpful to you. You might get ideas from it, but please always talk to your healthcare team, your medical team, before making any major lifestyle changes or medical changes. Because I'm not qualified to give medical advice, and I'm really not intending for anything I say to be like medical or dietary advice. A registered dietitian is the best person to talk to about dietary advice. Anyways, that is the disclaimer, so I'll just move on. So I was diagnosed at 4 years old with type 1 diabetes, and shortly after that I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. To be honest, I don't know what age I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I've just had it my whole life, and I'm pretty sure I had it like since around the time that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I know I've been taking the pills for my thyroid since I was a very small child, like as long as I can remember. I don't remember not taking those pills. So I think it was around the same time, and my diet has changed a lot over the years. I think overall, generally speaking, I've had pretty good control for most of my life. I've had times in my life where I was struggling a little bit. I think most people with type 1 diabetes at some point in their life will be experiencing diabetes distress at some point. For me, it's usually has to do with not the diabetes itself, but other things in my life that are going on that makes it really hard for me to like have enough space in my head for both my diabetes and all the stress that is happening outside of my diabetes. It's just hard to have so much up there. But generally, like over the course of my life, I would say I've had pretty good, I don't want to say control, but I've managed my diabetes pretty well. But this is a story about how I've had to change my diet and how it's helped me. So when I was first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, my mom, I remember one time going to my babysitter's house, and my mom was crying, and I remember like tapping my sister on the shoulder and be like, "Why is mom crying?" And then she was telling me that it's because of my diabetes. I think my mom, it was just like a flash, like a little snippet memory that I remember. I think she was probably trying to explain to the babysitter about what to watch out for, probably. So obviously, like when people are first diagnosed, it's very challenging for the parents and or the children. I don't remember really like going through. I don't really have like much of a diabetes diagnosis story because I was so small. I could get into that a little bit in a different video. I'm starting to get sidetracked, but the point that I'm trying to make is my mom, it took her time to become educated about type 1 diabetes. So it was kind of hard at first. But she did a really good job, I would say, overall. Like she got herself educated, and she helped me a lot to become independent early on, which I think is so important for little kids, because when you need to drop them off somewhere, they need to be able to understand how they feel if they're having low blood sugars, etc. I'm kind of going off on a tangent again. The story is about my diet, but so I decided to cut out some of this video because I was getting emotional and also thought about it more, and I didn't want to say something that I regretted. Not that it was like saying anything rude, but profession. I really don't want anyone to find out because I don't want to embarrass anyone. But my mom asked a trusted family member who was in a health profession about what my diet should be, like for advice on my diet. And I'm just realizing now in attempting to make this video that I guess I'm still have a little bit of emotions obviously attached to this, but my mom asked this trusted individual for advice, and they said that she needed to restrict my calories, and I was only 4 years old. That advice was not good. It was not the right advice for a 4-year-old with type 1 diabetes, and it was harmful to me. And apparently I still have some trauma that I didn't even realize attached to that. Interestingly, because I have told people that story and I didn't cry before, but for some reason today I did, so whatever. But essentially, my mom was doing the best that she could with what she had, and she thought that she needed to restrict my calories. But this family member that was trusted to give advice on this topic, I don't believe that they really had that much experience with type 1 diabetes in children. I think that they had experience with type 2 diabetes in adults, and this is a lesson for healthcare professionals that it is very important to understand the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, because if you don't, you can hurt someone. This family member was actually not, a medical professional that was in charge of my health, but they were in the medical profession and they were trusted. And so I'm like paranoid. I don't want like this to affect anyone's career or to get out to hurt anyone. Like, I'm just trying to say my story, but that happened, and I was hungry all the time, and I'm trying to think about like how I'm gonna edit this video. If the next segment is already, if in the next segment I already say this, but I'm sorry if I repeat myself, because it's the way I edit this video, and it's like I'm not the best at editing and I don't have that much time, so I might just end up repeating myself, and I'm sorry about that. But basically, my doctor ended up telling my mom that she was starving me and that I could actually eat 60 carbs per meal. My mom, obviously, I remember when she would recount the story, she told me like she felt awful, like, she absolutely was not trying to starve me. She literally was trying to help me. She was doing what she thought was best in my best interest. She was trying to help me. And when the doctor told her that, she felt horrible, and she obviously started to feed me more. So and she stuck to the 60 carb limit, and I've stuck to that like pretty much my whole life since then. Although I have, on occasions eaten more than that, but most of the time that's my limit that I keep for myself. But yeah, so I'm gonna be going into the next segment, and I actually forget what I said in the next segment, so I might end up repeating myself. But thank you for your patience, for listening to my story, and hope that it's helpful. Thank you. The video's not over yet. All right. I was gonna say bye, but it's not bye. Just okay. But I have a point, because once I started getting my period, I noticed that it was not so easy to manage my blood sugar as it used to be before. Before, everything seemed like so easy. When I was a kid, it was my carb to insulin ratio was 10 carbs per unit, and it was just like it never changed. It was always 10 carbs per unit, and it was just so easy, or it felt easy to me. But then when I started getting my period, I started noticing my ratio doesn't stay the same all the time. And so I would be constantly changing my ratio. And when I was in college, my doctor said I was doing a really good job and everything. But I quite honestly, like, I didn't tell my doctor this, but I would schedule my doctor's appointments during times of the month when I knew I would have better control, so that when she reviewed like the past 2 weeks of data, that it would be good, or not good, I shouldn't say that, but that it would be look like I was generally doing well. And I was generally doing well, and my A1C showed that I was doing well. But like, even things like that, like, I knew something, and none of my doctors even told me anything about how my menstrual cycle would if I didn't get any education about how my menstrual cycle would affect my blood sugars. Um and um Sorry, I was just thinking, but I'm starting to go off on a tangent. But anyways, yeah, I didn't get any education. I remember asking her, like, "Hey, does the menstrual cycle affect my blood sugar?" And she was like, "Yeah, it does." But then it was just kind of like, "Yep." So there's not much, like, you can't. The doctors don't really know exactly how to help people with. I feel like they don't have a lot of advice to give, or if they do, it's not always helpful, because I think there's not enough research on it. But and also because women are just different. Women are different. Women's bodies are different. So it's hard to give like a standard advice. I would think. But again, I'm not a professional. I'm not a medical professional. Please don't take anything I say as medical advice. Um and I don't mean to like I don't mean to. My doctor, I really liked her a lot. Like, during college, like, she's like one of my favorite doctors. So I'm definitely not trying to like say anything about doctors or anything. It's just, this is just the reality. And so I was noticing that, and I started changing my carbs insulin ratio depending on my menstrual cycle, and I was keeping like 60 carbs per unit. But I did bring up to my doctor at the time in college. I was like, like, I do have high blood sugars, like, around my period. And then she said, and I was like, should I be like doing something different with my diet around that time? And she said to limit my my carbs per meal to 40 carbs per meal, and see if that helped. Um, I don't remember if it was really helping that much. And then I think I just ended up going back to like standard 60 carb limit. And I think I did all right. Like, even all things considered, like, it was definitely like I had to watch my, like, be really mindful of like where I was in my menstrual cycle to be able to know how much insulin to take. And it's not always easy, because if you look at the menstrual cycle graph, it's actually complicated. I think when a lot of people talk about the menstrual cycle, how it affects women, they talk about like, oh, just a few days before the menses. But if you look at the graphs, there's a lot of hormones going up and down during the month. And I personally, as a n number of one, if this were a study, it's just one, it's a case study, it's not like really something that can apply to everyone, but in my specific situation, and do not take this as medical advice. I'm a unique individual, but I notice I even become insulin resistant when around ovulation. So it's not just, for me, it's not just premenstrual. And I think that absolutely makes sense. I mean, if you just look at the menstrual cycle graphs. So this is a big, huge, long story to basically say that it is very complicated, at least for me, knowing how much insulin to take because of that. And people talk a lot about how important it is to be able to know how to count carbs. While that is very, very true, I think that is an oversimplification, and it does a disservice to females, especially because it's really not that simple. Um, Knowing how to count carbs is only half the story. If I look at a granola bar, nutritional facts, I know how to. I don't want to sound like, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything. It's just that, like, I'm trying to figure out the right words to say this. I know I've had diabetes for 30 years. I know how to count carbs. Like, okay, I just don't want to say anything more because I don't want to make it sound like I'm arrogant or anything. But I've had diabetes my whole entire life. I learned how to count carbs as a child. My doctors never told me that I needed help with counting carbs when I was younger. So then when I got older, they're saying you don't know how to count carbs. How did I know it as a child, but then I didn't know it as an adult? I know myself, and I am smarter now than I was as a kid. So I'm not I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but it's like 3 decades of diabetes. I can read a nutritional label. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Um, so basically, it is pretty complicated as women. At least in my situation, I think a lot of women would say that they've got it figured out, and if you do, good job. That is awesome. But I feel like even though I do struggle to know how many units of insulin to take, because for example, um, if I eat 60, let's just hypothetically say I eat 60 grams of carbs in a meal. Let's say I go to my max, right? 60 carbs. Like, let's just say, like, I don't know, what am I eating? I don't know, like a sandwich with 2 slices of bread and maybe an apple on the side or something. And depending on like how big the slices are and how much the bread weighs and how big the apple is, blah blah blah. Let's just say it's 60 carbs. Or even let's not even say that because that factors in the weight of the bread and the apple. Let's just say I eat a frozen meal and I'm reading the package. It's as simple as like one tray of food, the entire tray is 60 carbs. Let's just hypothetically say that. It's, oh, hold on one sec. Yeah, counting carbs is only half of the battle of knowing how much insulin to take, right? So, um, despite everything, I still managed to have pretty good diabetes management for most of my life. Even and I've had a period since I was 17. So 17 years of having a period, I think I've done pretty well, even though it is not always easy to know how sensitive I am on any given day. Even with tracking my menstrual cycle, it's not as simple as just, you're not going to know until your blood sugar runs high that you need to start increasing your insulin. And you don't know exactly when it's going to start going high. You can estimate, but you never know exactly when. So you just have to wait, and you're kind of playing catch up. You're kind of it's hard. You're always kind of chasing the highs and chasing the lows instead of like proactively getting ahead of it, because you can't. I tried this before in the past, like trying to like predict when I'm going to start to need more insulin, and then taking the extra insulin before my sugars went high, but then I would go low. So you have to wait. And that's what is so hard. You don't know exactly what day it's going to be, or exactly how intense to what the magnitude of the effect of the menstrual cycle is going to be, because one month could be different from the next month. So you don't know exactly how much extra. At least this is just my personal experience. I've heard some women, their the effect of the menstrual cycle is pretty much the same every month. But for me, I don't know. Like some months I'm extremely resistant, and then some other months I'm only a little bit resistant before my period, and then vice versa. Some months I'm extremely sensitive on my period, and then other months I'm only a little bit sensitive. So it's like, how much do I increase? How much do I decrease? When? And so I'm always like having to wait until my blood sugars are already being affected before I could like do something about it. And so that's kind of hard. But I just do the best I can, and overall, like my doctors are telling me that I'm doing a great job. So even though it is difficult and it's like more of a headache, I'm still doing a decent job. And I'm not trying to brag or anything. I'm just saying that it's possible that even though it is very challenging, that you could still do it, but you have to be very diligent and mindful. Um, and basically, the moral of the story is that in that as I've gotten older, I've realized it's been that's my cat. I don't know if you can hear. Um, okay. But anyways, don't worry, I'll get to you in like 2 minutes. Okay. Um, it's their dinner time. That's what the alarm. It's only 4 minutes past their dinner time. Okay. But anyways, I gotta hurry. So it is a challenge, but I've noticed that as I've gone older, it seems like it's getting even more challenging. Um, I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but I feel like the way I was handling it before, of just like, waiting, and then like, oh, I'm starting to notice high blood sugars. Okay, start to increase the insulin. Oh, I'm starting to notice low blood sugar. Okay, start to decrease insulin. Like, and then just kind of like trial and error, like, oh, maybe I should increase it 2 extra units, or oh, that wasn't enough, or that was a little bit too much. Like, just always guessing. It feels like it's always a guessing game, but I somehow would like still end up doing a decent job. And then when I and then I think like maybe late 20s, early 30s, I started to notice like it's getting really hard to just guess. I don't know why, what is happening, but my guessing is just not working anymore. Um, like before, it wouldn't always work, but it would work a lot of the times. And then now it's like just feels like it's like never working. So I decided to go on a low carb diet, um, for a couple different reasons. One, to feel like a sense of like relief from the constant worry, because if, for example, I eat 60 carbs, and I think that my carb to insulin ratio is 10 carbs per unit. So I give myself 6 carbs, or 6 units. I could have absolutely counted those carbs absolutely correctly. But that's only half the story. If I think my ratio is 6 carbs per unit, then I'm going to give myself 10 units. But what if it's actually 3 carbs per unit? Because there's been months where there were times where I noticed, oh, I think it seems like I'm needing to do 3 carbs per unit. So that means that I'm only taking 10 units when I actually need 20. That's a huge difference. And this actually happens to me. And then there's other parts of my menstrual cycle where my carb to insulin ratio is, when I look back on my records, like how many carbs I eat after I went low, and I add up the low blood sugar carbs plus the meal and the insulin and stuff, and I factor it. And like in hindsight, I'm looking retrospectively, like what was my actual carb to insulin ratio. There's times, when it's 3 carbs per unit, times when it's 6 carbs per unit, and sometimes when it's 15 carbs per unit. Can you imagine if I do a 3 carb per unit ratio for 60 carbs, that would be 20 units, versus a 15 carb to insulin ratio would only be 4 units. That means I took 16 extra units. And if it is actually 15 carbs per unit and I am thinking 3 carbs per unit, that means I took 16 extra units times multiply that by 15, and then I have to eat that many more carbs. And maybe I'm already full from dinner. So it's just like I felt like it was becoming unsafe. Like the exacerbation of my everything seemed to be exacerbated. Like in the past, I never had to go down to 3 carbs per unit. But as I'm getting older, I'm noticing like there's certain times when that does seem to be the correct ratio. And it's scary to not know if it's 3 carbs per unit or 15 carbs per unit. It's scary for me. And so I just eat low carb now, and it removes so much stress and anxiety because when I eat higher carb, and I do. Some days I eat higher carb, and I think that's perfectly fine because I believe that people need to live a little. Um, and I was never taught that I couldn't eat certain things. So some days, on some occasions, I do allow myself to eat carbs, but on those days, I worry a lot more about my blood sugar. Yeah, I get to enjoy the food, and then I have to have the stress of it. So I am now eating low carb, and maybe it has something to do with getting older. I don't know, but something to do with being a female for sure. Um, but that's where I'm at right now, and everyone's gonna be different. So I'm definitely not saying to eat low carb. I'm just saying this is my story. I'm just one individual, and I hope that what I said helps you. Maybe you can take a lesson away, but don't apply the lesson until you talk to your medical team first. Don't take anything I say as medical advice. Um, and please drop a like and comment if you feel like you have something to add to the conversation. Um, and um, give me a follow if you want, if you like my content. Um, and hit the notification if you feel like doing so. No pressure. No pressure. I hope that this helps and, um, you know, kind of gives a heads up even to the younger women out there that things can change, and I'm hearing from older women with type 1 diabetes that things definitely change during menopause. So I'm trying to mentally prepare for that, so maybe the younger females out there might just kind of get a heads up from my story. It doesn't mean that what happens to me is going to happen to you, because we're all different, but I just kind of want you to, I hope that someone out there finds this useful. But I know I've said this a million times. Don't take anything I say as medical advice. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Bye.